We also are very fortunate to have a real visionary in the audience, Bill Greenawalt. Bill Greenawalt was progressive before most people in the United States was progressive. He's always been a leader, speaking out on issues of importance to people fighting against injustice and racism and inequality. And Bill is just a terrific human being, a fantastic asset to the town, and he also participated in the March on Washington. And this is the end of Black History Month, and we invited Bill to speak today about his experiences participating in this important march which changed the world. So Bill.
Thank you all for this invitation. It certainly was a magnificent and important event. I'll go through some of the remarks I made in the sermon I gave at church, but also some interpolations. 1963 was the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. And the amendments that were passed at that time largely or partly were unfulfilled. And this march on Washington was the 20th century's pivotal event in the struggle for civil rights and racial equality. I was in a very prestigious Wall Street law firm, and I told them I felt I had to go on this march. There had been many civil rights events prior to that time, and this was to be a unified march. I wanted to be on it. I awoke at about 5 o'clock when my alarm went off. I got shaved, got dressed, and walked to the subway at the Borough Hall and went from there to Penn Station. At that time, I boarded a special train for March on Washington destination. There were many people on the trains. There were a lot of special trains. As a matter of fact, there were 2,200 chartered buses and 40 special trains from all over the country. 250,000 people approximately appeared at the march, about 2/3 African American, about 1/3 white. And it was a very joyous and a great occasion. It was set for a non-confrontational march, and one of the major things about it, and you may have seen the film Rustin, about Bayard Rustin, and who organized the march from Harlem. And the key to this particular march was it was to be nonviolent. We walked after a bus took us from the train to the Washington Monument. We walked about a mile toward the Lincoln Memorial and Monument. We were gathered around the reflecting pool. The speakers and several dignitaries were up on the stage in front of the Lincoln statue, and the rest of us were down at the level of the reflecting pool. I was about a third of the way down from the stage, could see clearly. I was about 5 people, let's say, from the edge of the reflecting pool. So I had a very good vantage point for it. There were many singers that sang from on the day at the march. Joan Baez, Odetta, Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan, Lena Horne. The great contralto Marian Anderson also sang, and I remember that particularly. She sang, "He's got the whole world in his hands." And this was so memorable because she had sung there before when she was refused to be able to sing at the Daughters of the American Revolution and Eleanor Roosevelt in particular got her to sing at the Lincoln Monument, and she sang America at that time. But that was particularly moving to me, and she was in good voice. And the march was a true miracle. After the march, the leaders met with President Kennedy the day after, and congressional leaders, and pressuring them on a strong civil rights plank and measures. This confirmed the link between civil rights and economic rights, and gave rise to the economic programs of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. You may remember that summer, John Kennedy was unfortunately assassinated, and this gave way to Lyndon Johnson, who was one of the best, if not the best, perhaps after FDR, of our presidents in getting measures through Congress, and I must say Biden is quite good. But the 64, in 1964, that ensued the Civil Rights, the Voting Act, and then the next year the Civil Rights Act. Along the way, there had been Head Start, and the march had tremendous effects. It increased popular support, particularly among whites, for what was called the Civil Rights Revolution. It transformed America's law and politics. Its message of concern for all was carried over into immigration reform, Head Start, the war on poverty, Johnson's Great Society, and Medicare and Medicaid. It sustained and strengthened those who continued to work for social justice. It inspired a broad spectrum of Americans, and it made bigotry no longer respectable, and curbed abuses in speech and action. Unfortunately, there were some fallbacks from this peak that we reached at that time, and in 1964 and 1965. What effect did it have on me? It had a great deal of effect on me. I left my firm. I was a litigator all throughout my legal career, and I left this firm to go into the Office of Economic Opportunity. And in particular, I was regional counsel for the Northeast office, which was in New York City. But I also took on the additional job of being in charge of legal services, setting up legal services for the poor. And I became the director of legal services for the Northeast Regional Office of the OEO, Office of Economic Opportunity, in the anti-poverty program. And in that capacity, I really knocked myself out, working day and toward the nights. I roamed all the states from Maine down through New Jersey and also Puerto Rico, and set up legal services for the poor programs in 75 different programs throughout the country, throughout that region. This was 1/3 of all those in the country, and there were 8 regions. I did get a special promotion for my efforts, but I feel that my greatest accomplishment in life was setting up those programs. They have served millions of poor people who could not otherwise afford lawyers. When Nixon came in, they transferred the program, but it's still going on, still as healthy as ever. And one of the best programs is here in Westchester, the Legal Services of the Hudson Valley. Just to give you an indication of what I had to do, there were about 8 community action agencies in Westchester. Each one wanted its own legal services program. I merged them all into a county-wide program, which was originally the Westchester-Putnam Legal Services Program. Now they've taken over many other counties. So we got a combined program, and it's now one of the best in the country. Another indication is the statewide program in Maine, the Pine Tree Legal Assistance Program. And we had a peculiar situation in New York City, which was that they did not want to have poor on the board. That was one of the requirements, poor or their representatives on the board. So we insisted in a litigation that the first program was not valid for that reason. And they changed it, and they put poor or their representatives on the board, as they had to be on every program. So I went throughout the whole region, went even to Puerto Rico, where there was tremendous poverty at the time at certain places. But that's what happened to me on that, and other things happened as well. My continuing interest in the community in New York City, Cobble Hill Park, parks here in Westchester, and I became involved greatly in parks and still am, and other things such as the church, so on. So the key, of course, event of that whole situation, where all the civil rights leaders, 6 of them, had to speak. They all spoke well. But of course, the greatest speaker was Martin Luther King, Jr. And he said, among other things, by no means am I going to read you all I have here. I must say to my people, let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. We must not be led to a distrust of all white people, for many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. Then he started to go on, and Mahalia Jackson, he shouted to him, she was sitting down, tell him about the dream, Martin. And then he started about the dream part of other speeches that he'd given and brought it to us in the audience waiting for this. He says, I have a dream, and you know this, that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little white boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. And of course, at the end, he said that we hope that we will be able, all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Catholics, Gentiles and Protestants, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, great God Almighty, we are free at last. So we, the 250,000 people, were genuinely awed by his speech, and we all joined hands at the end, 250,000 of us, and sang We Shall Overcome, swaying back and forth by the reflecting pool. It was a truly memorable occasion, and I hope that we have others like it in the 21st century, but I can tell you that it's certainly one of my great thrills to have been on that march. Thank you.
You know, I think you're a real inspiration, and you know, again, account of you, many lives are better than they were before you got involved. So you've definitely made a very major positive contribution, and it's really great to have people like you in the world who speak out even before an issue is totally popular with with the public. You always expressed yourself and have taken stands, years before it became mainstream. So I really really appreciate what you've done, and again, thank you for being part of our community.
Well, thank you, Paul, and thanks to the board. Are there any, do you want to ask any questions? I know you have a big agenda here.
No, we do have a big agenda, but I just want to say I just want to say thank you so much. You have been an inspiration, just as you and I have had different conversations about what you have done and your contribution to what you have done as it relates to civil rights. You know, it's unfortunate today when you look at the news and you see how we are being attacked, affirmative action is being attacked, which we shouldn't even have affirmative action anymore. We should at this point be equal, but we know we are still fighting for all of us to be equal. But you, Bill, have really been truly genuine in what you stand for. And I use my phrase, no window dressing. And I truly appreciate what you have brought to us, to the people, to everyone you have done, everything you have done for civil rights. We sit up here, we fight every day to make sure that the town of Greenburgh understands that we are one community. We want to be equal. We should not be separated. We should not be, pit against each other. And I'm hoping, when we listen to Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, that hopefully one day his dream will come true, because I share that same dream too. Sitting in the seat is very challenging, because we know the beauty of human beings, and it doesn't have to be based on the color of someone's skin. So thank you so much for all that you have done and what you have brought to civil rights, and thank you what you have done for Greenburgh and for myself personally. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Gina. And certainly Greenburgh is a leader in this effort, and I think the council is remarkable and has done a great job, and Paul, over the years. And as you know, I'm not wild. I did go to Edgemont School, but we lived in the High Ridge section of Old Colony Road around there. But I am not in favor of Edgemont's being a separate village. I worked on that, against that. And I'm really would cherish the community that we have, and my kids used to participate at school. And when we had Lois Bronze was Mrs. White in the first play we put on, which was My Fair Community, and I was her husband at that time in that play. So, I mean, we go back a long ways. And I've got a little bit of
I'm glad you added in that play.
Yeah, I was going to
Thank you,
ask
Francis.
you if your wife knew that.
a good correction.
And Bill, you have truly done so much and continue to do so. It's not like you're retired and you're sitting at home, watching us on TV. But when you were reading what you have prepared, and I know you've given this speech before, but when you got to certain quotes, you could see that you were speaking like as if you were still hearing the words from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's true.
And it comes across. And you've never been anything other than genuine and saying what you believe. What I've always admired about you is if you have a conversation with you, we never have to wonder what you were really thinking after you leave.
Absolutely.
It's very refreshing.
Wait, don't go away. Don't go away. You set an example as an ally, and you are a man of virtue, inclusiveness, and integrity, and you really set the bar very high, and we will all work to achieve that level, but we may not make it there. So we thank you for setting that goal for us.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
There's no pressure here.
The pressure's on us.
Thank you all.
Bill.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.